At this point, we're going to invite up our august panel for a really sort of informal discussion on the future of acne and rosacea. So come on up, guys. We have Jenny Kim. Is Jenny here? Great. From UCLA, noted acne researcher, along with Jonathan Weiss, another well-known figure in AARS who's done a ton of acne research. We have Francois Fournier, President of Galderma, and Bill Humphries, CEO of Merz. And I'll take the seat here, and I appreciate their willingness to be involved. So there's only one correct answer, and you have not forgotten.
Larry Eichenfield.
That's good. Well done. So we know. So what we're going to do is I'm just going to lay out the questions, and I'd love for you guys to sort of weigh in. You can do it individually, and then we'll have some discussion. So, this is an interesting time in healthcare in America and around the world, and I think it's hard to have a clear crystal ball to know necessarily what healthcare is going to look like in 5 to 10 years. But we don't want to discuss all of healthcare. We want to really discuss as dermatologists who have a strong interest in acne and rosacea, and as people in the dermatologic pharmaceutical industry, both with individual histories and corporate positions. We're interested in what you think the future might bring for acne and rosacea. And so, it could be what you think is going to happen in research, what you think might be evolving in terms of medical therapies, how reimbursement may change. There's certain questions about whether there might be sort of acne becoming more of a pushed as a cosmetic part of medicine and separated out. The issues we may face in the future in terms of insurance reimbursements or other aspects that you think might impact on our knowledge and care of acne and rosacea. And you can choose to do both diseases or just one. So maybe Francois, do you want to lead off? 5-10 year future ball on what you think will be happening with acne?
Okay. First, thanks for the invitation. I just realized when I see the audience with so many experts that you and I were taking a big risk talking about acne and rosacea, and I will try to do my best. I think today when it's about acne, we see very much one disease, and we see in French acne vulgaris. And there are many actors, they see that as one disease, very little segmentation about the population. And I think for Galderma, the ambitions we have, it is really, we see 4 directions for the next 10 years in acne. First, it will be very much about improving the diagnostic of acne with a much better understanding of the segmentation and the population. The second will be really to treat, but also to prevent what we call the population at risk, because we forget them when we talk about acne scars. Right now, I think, at least on the industry side, we have a very little understanding. Third, it will be to bring quicker treatment, because the earlier the better, and we know also how important is the adherence in acne. And the fourth one, it will be, again, about the population. It will be really to bring solution according to the age of the population. That's really the 4 things that we try to do. And I'm saying that because you mentioned the payers before, and I think the payers today, they see acne as like the big elephant in the room for dermatology, a non-life-threatening disease. They don't see the complexity of the disease. And I think our job altogether will be really how can we segment the population and how can we bring solutions according to the profile. And I think it's what we are trying to do. It's the way I see acne in the future. But again, 10 years, it's a long road.
Okay. Jonathan, you want to weigh in?
Yeah, I looked at rosacea and acne when you asked me the questions.
Okay,
and I think that the two, there's a dichotomy there. I'll digress for a second. About 10, 15 years ago, Sunday night at the Academy was largely reserved for a dinner by Bob Bitterman, who was the chairman at Dermot. And his minions would go around and they talk to us and say, what are the challenges, or what do you need in clinical dermatology? And the last time we had that dinner in New Orleans, I remember several of us said, we need something to take care of redness. And now that future is here. So I think if we sit down and we actually figure out what it is we need, we have the tools and resources and people like Jenny and Diane who are doing the research to help us figure that out and make the strides that we need to make. Having said that, I think in rosacea the future is bright. I think we are doing great at figuring out the pathophysiology of rosacea. We've got it figured out more that it's a vascular disease, and that we are beginning to make strides in that direction. And we've got at least 2 drugs that are in development to take care of the redness, one that is further along than another and should hopefully be available in the next year or so. Unfortunately, I think for acne, we are faced with a lot of challenges, so many that I had to write them down, that, you know, I think we have to be honest. We have to figure out what our strengths and weaknesses are. And I think that if we really look at our level of success in treating acne, we get at best a B- and probably a C+ or a C, because short of Accutane, we really don't do that well. Some of the best drugs that we study get 70 to 80% improvement. If a kid comes in with 100 pimples and still has 20 to 30 pimples, they're not that impressed with 70% improvement. And we really need to do better than that with our basic acne care if we don't want to put everybody on Accutane. I think we have to look at what the burden of the cost of acne care and who's going to shoulder that. You brought that up, Larry. And I really think that we need to figure out how can we continue to sustain the current model. And my simple answer to that would be we can't. We can't have $800 a month antibiotics that are the most effective but are out there with a price tag of $800 a month. So we have to figure out a way around that. And with regard to research, we need to more fully understand the pathophysiology of acne. We're well along. We now believe that we may have inflammation as the primary problem in acne, even with comedonal acne, not the microcomedone, or perhaps both are at play. But we need to start to target those inflammatory mediators and figure out, as we develop new drugs, I would implore, I know several drug companies pour a lot of money into research to look at the molecules that are in the inflammatory mediators and get better with those. Clinical research, I think most of you know I'm a clinical researcher, and we are having a very hard time filling clinical trials. I don't know where all the subjects are going to come from in the future with the ACA and more available care. It's going to become expected that people get the care and get it cheaply, and that I think is a challenge already, as a lot of our population is insured. And I think that there's increased regulation with research. And finally, as I've said, I think our corporate partners, we need them to invest in the research, which many of them do, and we need to say no to reformulations, to DESI drugs that are now branded and they cost 3 times as much as the generic that's out there, and we really need a new approach and some new molecules.
Jenny or Bill?
I'll speak and focus on research because that's what I do mostly, and I'm not sure how much of an expert I am on anything else. I think it's a challenging time for research in dermatology. It's exciting for me that when I started research about 12 years ago, I saw that acne research has really increased over the last 10 years or so. So it's exciting time. On the other hand, I think the last 5 years, maybe more, it's very challenging for people who really want to do basic science research. For several reasons, the NIH funding is very poor, and I think the regulation on pharma and also the university makes it really hard for us to collaborate together. On the other hand, after being in research for a while, I really do see that collaboration could bring something really fantastic in the future, because we, as an individual researcher, probably won't be able to survive unless you are someone who can get 5-hour ones in the future. So how that's going to play in our system, I'm not sure. I'm hoping that there will be more collaboration somehow, that we can come to some kind of environment where industry and university or other people who are doing research can come together. But even within the university, we're looking at a model of an individual not surviving, but a multi-group surviving, so that expertise can be shared. And hopefully with a group like ours, we could do research together, just like we do clinical research together sometimes with different university settings or private settings where we can get a lot of patients rather than one PI trying to get all the patients. There might be a very creative way that we can work together as a team rather than as an individual. So hopefully that we can continue to learn about the basics of acne and rosacea and then take it to the clinical and then try to develop something that's really novel and effective to help our patients.
I think the microbiome initiative is going to change our perspective on acne.
I mean, I don't think one thing is one area of anything changes anything that much. It is a hot topic right now, as everyone knows, and so it's interesting whether that's going to lead to something that is really novel. It's hard to know. Certainly, it's going to tell us a lot more information, and from information, we learn more information. And so I think that's how knowledge is always better. Just like I think inflammation is important, but is it the end-all answer to acne? Probably not. But little steps that all of us make will hopefully make us reach further, and another question will come from something that we answer. But the nice thing about Microbiome Project is it can bring some of us together, and I think that's where the NIH has the Microbiome Project for many different organs, not just skin, but everything else.
Well, one thing that's interesting about the microbiome is that they learned very quickly that it's not only is it not static in an individual, but the whole concept of the development of what colonizes is obviously changes over time. Mm-hmm. So when we talk about, I remember when I just wrote a pediatric acne book for pediatricians, and when we got to the pathogenesis chapter, they started with inflammation and comedones, and it was like, and then they had sebum production under that, and it was like, in a pediatric acne book, it should pretty much make sense that unless you have sebum activity, I mean, that's why you don't see acne in a 3-year-old unless it's pathologic. I mean, maybe put that first. But the whole question of what happens developmentally in terms of many different aspects would be something that hopefully will give us some insights that might drive future research and interventions. Yeah. Bill?
So, I mean, I pick up on the points that I think John and Francois made. And there's going to be, in my opinion, a healthy tension between payers, patients, and physicians in the next 10 years as payers say it's cosmetic, we don't want to pay for it, and manufacturers believe that, there's a need for new products, and so we have to have new chemical entities. John mentioned reformulations. I think that's right. So if we can push for new chemical entities, the challenge from a manufacturer standpoint is the math doesn't always work. And so you have to make the math work, and that means we have to be a little bit smarter, whether we're working with NIH or there's other groups that do get drugs that are NCEs that are used for other indications. I mean, we have examples with biologics, but there are some drugs that can be repurposed that are NCEs that may give a solution to acne. And then I think the other piece that's incumbent on the manufacturers to help with this is to focus on pharmacoeconomics. So as we build phase 2 and phase 3 trials, we have to build in the part that will satisfy the payers so they see that they should pay for this and it makes sense.
Well, that's much harder in Europe right now. Right?
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. If I can rebound on what Bill said, I think for me there are 2 additional components. We have 60 million people having acne in the US, of which 12 go to a physician, which means that we have 48 million on the beach looking for a treatment, first. And second, back to the payer, and you mentioned Europe. I think in Europe now they are focusing very much not only on the efficacy of a treatment, but on the effectiveness, which is related to the pharmacoeconomy, which means I think we should move from highly technical, randomized clinical studies that we have to do with the FDA for the registration of a product to more what I would call the real life for the patient. And I think it's really the challenge, but also the opportunity for us. It is how can we really develop and register a product where at the end of the day, it will reflect the real life for the patient. And I think for acne, more than for any other skin conditions, I think it's for me the challenge, but also the opportunity that we have to address altogether, because it's at the end of the day, the quality of life, the benefit for the patient that we have to address first.
I mean, there's a big chasm sort of between what would be real life studies and what you need to do for registration. I mean, there's an artificiality to the registration. And in the US, unlike Europe, right, we get our drugs tested against vehicle or placebo. And we've talked about doing more comparative effectiveness research to look at cost efficacy, but that would be a sea change for us. We don't even see that on the horizon. It might be threatening in some way of a new drug if you had to do that.
But if you don't do it, it's not going to get paid for.
Exactly.
And so you're not going to get traction. I mean, and there's, wonderful leaders at Dr. Shalita, Dr. Layton, Dr. Webster, who can tell the pains of patients psychologically who are damaged because their acne isn't treated. And I think it's really important to make sure that payers and people understand that acne is just not a cosmetic disease. This is something that the patient endures in their early years, and it carries on all through their life.
I think we may have some tension in terms of how we handle that, though. I remember Jim Layton years ago saying, just make it cosmetic. Maybe we'll be better off in terms of categorizing it that way. On the other hand, I think you're right that we probably could do a better job explaining to other people the psychological impact. It was very interesting. I was having I met with David Fisher. I was visiting Mass General a few months ago. And about 5 minutes into it, we realized we were both pediatricians. He's actually a pediatrician, not a dermatologist, but I'm both. And he quickly morphed over. He's a melanoma guy. He said, you know something? I did pediatric oncology. He said, we probably have more deaths associated with acne and suicide than we probably have pediatric oncologic deaths because the death rate's so low with pediatric malignancies. And it was a sort of a interesting comment because we don't really have a good job of collecting that data, but we know that there's such an influence to people who are affected. How we get together that information, it's hard because even in people who are doing research, once you mention quality of life studies, everyone sort of glazes over. We have to figure out how to.
So I have a question for the two of you about the whole reimbursement scheme for medications now. What percentage of your AWP on a tube of acne medicine is elevated? What percent more is your price elevated because of all of the regulatory issues that go on, all of the cards, everything else you have to do because of the current environment? How much could you, by what percent could you drop a tube of medicine if you didn't have to deal with all of that?
Deal with what?
With the cards, with the cost, with insurance companies. Basically, if it were cash paid, by what percentage could you drop your AWP?
What I can say, we have more and more what I would call non-productive cost versus productive cost that we have to cover through our price, which means there are things that we have to do. There are a ticket of entry, if I can use that word, which is a bit higher and different, which means there is the cards are reshuffled. Right. And it's higher.
Yeah, and I think the model changes. So, John, while you could put it on a tube, I think the model of what the sales representative does in 10 years from now and how many are there of them and what's the role of MSLs and others and education probably changes those economics. But if you're forcing me in a corner and say, give me a percentage, it's probably 25%.
At least.
Jenny?
I also wonder in 5 to 10 years how much our world will change with so much going on with the internet and my kids are 11 and 12 and they function differently. It's Instagram and things that I don't even know how to do. And for young people, it's not a big deal. I mean, people don't even talk on the phone now. They text. And you wonder with the telemedicine and things like that, how our medicine is going to change. And particularly for visual disease, you wonder if physicians can communicate with patients and then be reimbursed and also therefore enhance possibly their, one of the challenges with young people is the challenge of, can they be compliant and can you enhance compliancy? Can you communicate with them better so that they're on therapy for longer and then give them positive feedback? So different kind of care for patients, not just are they getting better when they come, but more communication and then therefore getting positive feedback for young people may make them use all the medications better. And I think it's just going to be possibly a different type of medicine we might be practicing.
Plus additional things, I go beyond 10 years. In 2050, across the world, we will have more than 2 billion people older than 60 years older. which means by definition we'll have also less young people, and we'll have more old people. And the question would be, acne by definition could be impacted, whereas rosacea might benefit also from that evolution of the population. I think it's important. And second, food for thought, and it's not a joke, and I know that you will like it. It's about the nutrition, and I think there are questions around the nutrition and the correlation between the nutrition and acne. That's also, I think, things that we need to consider, because now we see, and I think you see more and more young people having acne, which is also a question. The balance is shifting, but there is also an evolution within the young population for acne.
I guess that's a big, so it'll be really interesting to get some good critical research to look at the nutrition question and its impact on acne. We certainly need that. How about, I wanted to ask maybe, you live in LA, Jenny, the procedural dermatology and acne and procedural dermatology. It's out there. When people have done guidelines, they get to certain points, they go, this stuff probably works, we just don't have any data. There's certainly a variety of devices that are available. It's not a big part of the market, but what's your sense of that? You think is that going to change much, or is that?
I practice in a tertiary center, so it's probably very different. We get a lot of referrals in our acne patients so they've tried different medical treatments already. So a lot of patients come requesting this. And I think I'm seeing it more because there's negative media out there about Accutane or, and so parents bring their children in and saying they don't want to be on antibiotics for long because some studies with association with cancer or infection, upper respiratory infection. And so they get little bits of information and then they already come in wanting. And then with the positive media that the marketing is for lasers and things like that, I think a lot of times patients come in, at least in Los Angeles, wanting that. So we're seeing increase in patients demanding that and that they don't want to be on isotretinoin or antibiotics.
Yeah, do you give it to them?
I don't give it to them, no. Right.
The difference between them wanting something that doesn't really exist.
Right. We always try to do them. Absolutely, Dr. Shalita. I think we always try to do the medical treatment first, but do I never give it to them? No, I do give it to some people who they won't go on anything else or nothing works, and we try. But usually I tell them that it's not that effective.
Okay. I don't know if we have a microphone for out there, but if anyone has any comments or questions, now would be the time. We do, so please, because we have other people with lots of expertise and experience and good minds.
Hi, I'm Alan Datner from New York. I do a lot of work with nutrition and acne and found some ways of solving problems involving changing gut flora, improving digestion and whatnot. And I see acne as, in a way, also a symptom of problems to come. I mean, the people who are eating the diets that are going to engender acne are looking towards bowel cancer, heart disease, and whatnot. And getting people to make shifts in their diet is a very difficult thing to do. And I look to technology for helping solve that problem in terms of identifying really specifically what things they most have to drop. And this is one of the places I hope to find help from the companies I see as a potential shift in terms of personalized medicine. That we have the possibility of taking some of the half a dozen extant tests now that people use that might tell you to stop 40 foods, which gets very difficult for people. If we can refine that kind of testing and have technology that you people bring help us hone that down, we can really help people a lot more. And at the same time, we could be looking at the statistics of the things that I mentioned in terms of lowering incidence. So I think that there's a lot of potential for helping in the future. Also, I believe that toxicities are manifest in terms of the skin. I think I always tell my patients the biggest lump of fat near where they're getting acne is their brain. And I've certainly seen people, and then so it may be necessary to dump lipids that are saturated with things. And my most obvious example was a farmer who was spraying pesticides and getting them all over him and having folliculitis in the back of his scalp that needed steroids and antibiotics to control until we got him away from that, and also did some things to get rid of the pesticides in his brain. So I think that there's a lot of room for identification of the kinds of things that are specifically aggravating people and for helping get rid of those in the body, as well as the techniques that we're using now. So I think there's a lot to add, and we really need technology to help us do the identification, to flip the switch on allergic reactions that seem to be chronic so that people can go back to foods normally, to changing the gut microbiota. There's roughly 100 trillion organisms living in the human gut, 10 times the number of the cells that we have. There used to be 120 species, and the latest techniques pushed it up to 1,000 and then to 5,000 different species of organisms living in our gut. And when you think about the blue genes and crays and the biggest computers we have online on Earth today, they can't touch the questions that we could ask in terms of how these things are related. So we have to use soft as well as hard data. So I think we've got to look for various hints and put all this together and look to you people who have the technology to begin to help us identify the causes, how to individualize our medicine, and how to streamline it so that maybe we start with the technology but then find out it's an ear crease or something else that is all we need to look at to make identifications.
Any other questions? Bill?
As you know, I'm interested in diet, and the reason I'm talking to you today is there was a paper presented today or issued today on prostate cancer as influenced by whole milk. There's a definite incidence came out of Boston, and I think it will change, at least I hope it will change our thinking about diet. Pediatrics has been the baby feeding specialty for generations. I think it's really important that pediatricians learn how to feed the babies and kids and teenagers and so forth, so that there is less impact on the future. There was a study out of Iceland which links dairy with prostate cancer. This new one does the same. I think it really behooves us to look at the hormones in dairy products and what they do to the hormones that drive acne. The FDA has never, I have a letter from the FDA has never looked into the hormones in dairy products, ever. They have no plans to. This is something that the industry could really help with. If we're looking at nutrition and we're looking at prevention, because treatment's one thing, but prevention is much more important. If you're preventing not only acne, but prostate cancer and possibly breast cancer, then you're on the right side of the game. Thank you.
It's some of the hardest studies to figure out how to do, but really from a clinical standpoint, and also to get acne, because clinical research that's not pharmaceutical based has been very hard to do in terms of intervention studies, and whether we could get NIMS or some other group to figure out how to support that would be really an issue. Any closing comments from the panel? Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah.
I had a couple of quick comments. James Fulton, University of Miami. I'm a big believer in the South Beach diet, getting my kids off of sugar, which is not always easy. But I've been sending a lot of biopsies to Peter Elias at San Francisco, who is an ichthyosis expert, because I'm a big believer in Dennis Knudsen's early work that acne is a disease of lamellar granules, and that vitamin A pushes the lamellar granules back and corrects the keratinization problem. So we're trying to document that. And also, I've been doing a lot of culture work on the acne patients and really found that James Layden's work is right, that a third of my patients have no C. acnes, a third have a lot of C. acnes, and another third are in the middle. So I want to really de-emphasize the C. acnes as the early pathogenic event. I think it causes severe inflammation and scarring later on, but I think it's a genetic defect of the lamellar granules.
We'll see how it pans out. Okay. Any closing comments from the group?
The only thing I will say on my side, it's when I see what we invest in research, early development and development, you can be sure of our support in acne and rosacea for the next 10 years and 20 years. That's, I think, it's a commitment.
Okay. Well, I thank the panel very much for sharing their thoughts with us. Thank you. Yeah. Appreciate it.